I decided to make this video because I came up with a title that I liked. So this is Depressed Philosophical Venting, not Philosophical Depressed Venting, because, it's not very philosophical, it's more depressed venting about philosophy, because at this point, as much as I like to say that it's the thing that I like, I've really more or less given up on abstract reasoning. No matter how convincing an argument is, I just feel like I don't want to be taken in by it anymore. But, I still feel like I need to do something, anything, so I can't like to concentrate on religious philosophy. I don't think I'm at all religious at this point in time, but I even especially like to study Islamic philosophy and theology because I am most very definitely not a Muslim, and most nobody I know is a Muslim. And I guess, just sort of, denying Islam is an easy thing, but when you really, think about it as much as I do and kind of, get into really feel the people praying 5 times a day, people going through all the rituals, all the history, all the wars and whatnot, and not just cynical cash grab wars, people legitimately fighting and dying and living their whole lives, that for me is something that is just simply untrue and just kind of pointless. And even if we're like, well, you know what, actually, maybe Islam is true, which I don't think so, but I hope I don't get shot for saying that, but I don't think so, but let's just look at the Islamic perspective here, then that just means there are many other people in the world whose lives are meaningless again. I think that not everybody can be correct, and some people, I'm just very struck by the ways that, it's really possible to take a bad path through life, I guess, or not. I mean, who cares, as long as I think there is, whatever. But anyway, in China, there's a saying, 996, which means you work 9 to 9, 6 days a week. And then, again, from an Islamic perspective, since most of those people definitely aren't Muslims, and many of them probably aren't religious at all, or they have some sort of what would be considered paganism in Islam after a long life of working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Their final end is in hell, forever, burning, and just, again, not so much the reasoning as the real weight of thinking about that sort of thing in Arabic. It's very, you memorize the stuff, you hear it every day, it's kind of hard to get out of your mind. But I still like ancient philosophy and religious philosophy. Reading Augustine is very sad, and it seems like most anything that I want out of literature is to be depressed. There's this lovely, like a set of chapters in Augustine's Confessions where he talks about how his friend died, and he's, talking about trying to say some things about finding solace in God and whatnot, though he sounds so very unhappy. And, he often says things like, well, God won't abandon us like other things do. That's why we should prefer God to other things. But, so many people have so many different ideas about, what you need to do to have a good relationship with God and whatnot. So, by Augustine's writing, and I hope that nobody tries to argue with me on this because I'm just too tired to argue, that, for instance, many Jewish people, despite what they may think, do not have a good relationship with God. And, I'm not an Augustine expert, but I do believe that he would have said that many Jewish people would go to hell. I at least know that Dante thought that many Muslims would go to hell, so even God is not really something you can rely on with absolute certainty. Of course, I don't really believe in that personally, but, well, Anyway, I'm just venting and I'm saying random things, but personally I prefer Pyrrhonism, which is an ancient Greek philosophy, not very popular. I think it's always hard to just give a description of it because I think that just nothing makes up for the lived experience of it. Even then, I don't really get along with other Pyrrhonists. They don't like me, but Pyrrhonism is more or less the school about doubting everything. At least that's how I see it, I guess there's just simple practice of thinking anything and then saying, well, maybe that's not true. Maybe it's not true that Pyrrhonism is the school of doubting for everything from little things to, did I lock the door? Did that person dislike me? Did I mess up that conversation? Was it my fault? To big things like, I don't know if my parents like me. I don't know if I'm going to hell after I die. I don't know if I'm living a good life, etc., etc. And just this continual sense of reading these philosophical, theological systems just kind of clunk out for reasons that I don't think anybody would have expected that they did. I mean, it's just so hard to read anything at this point. I appreciate Maimonides. Maimonides is a medieval Jewish philosopher who tried to reconcile what was then, solid medieval science, Aristotelianism with the truths of religion. And, people are often talking about deep reading, but I feel like it's a good example where the deep reading hurt more than it helped. I don't really think that, using medieval ideas of how the cosmos worked would really help make a more accurate Bible reading. I think that more in-depth reading just sometimes multiplies errors and whatnot. But I keep reading it anyway because I have to do something. It's the sort of reason where if I really ask myself, why do I think that I need to eat food? I don't think that I can give a really good answer for that. I just kind of do it because it's the thing that I feel like I have to do.